right, guys, so I'm gonna jump right in. If you guys have any problems hearing me or anything happens with my screen, definitely just let me know ahead of time. I've definitely presented and the screen's not been on the right page and nobody told me, so just let me know in advance. So my name's Lauren. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm from the Career Center, and we're also going to have the Young Alumni Council with us today, so welcome. I'm a career consultant in the Pitt Career Center for Engineering and Neuroscience students. Just briefly, today's agenda is going to focus on a 25 to 30-minute presentation from myself from the Career Center. Then we're going to have just brief questions for myself, very brief. Really save a lot of your questions for the expert of panels that's going to be following my presentation. And then before I get started, I just wanted to invite one of our Young Alumni Council members to talk a little bit about how to get involved.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren, and hi, everyone. I think everyone here is a graduating senior, so I think this announcement is relevant for all of you. If anyone is younger, this will apply to you in the near future. But as Lauren said, we're with the Young Alumni Council. And what that means is we're a group of about 20 graduates that have graduated from Pitt within the last 10 years, who work with the Pitt Alumni Association to kind of just help make the experience for young alumni the best it can be. And the way we do that is kind of across three pillars. The first is advise. So we serve as liaisons to different parts of campus, such as athletics, within the Alumni Association, fundraising, about how to best make sure there's opportunities for young alumni to be involved, and make sure those experiences are the best they can be. The second one is engage. And so we help out with some of our own programming and events specifically for young alumni. One that we like to do is Hillman After Dark. So that's after the fireworks on Friday of homecoming. There's kind of an event at Hillman that I think has to move next year due to construction, but hopefully it'll be back to its original spot soon. And then the third is to promote. And so we help communicate the offerings and opportunities the Alumni Association has specifically for young alumni through various email and social media channels. So if something like that sounds interesting to you, and if you're looking for a way to stay involved post-graduation, I'd encourage you to apply for the Pitt Young Alumni Council. We actually launched our application for the next term today. It'll be open until May 28th. So plenty of time post-finals and all the semester ending for you to take a look and fill out an application. I'm going to post the link in the chat in just a second. And we also have a couple info sessions coming up later in the month. So you can get a chance to learn a little bit more about what we do, and also chat with a couple members in more detail. Those info sessions are going to be on Wednesday, April 21st, and Tuesday, May 11th. And there's more information about those also at the link I'll post. But yeah, so I would encourage you to apply to the Pitt Young Alumni Council if you're looking for a way to get engaged and stay connected post-graduation. And it would be for a 2-year term is what we recruit for. So we'll start this July and run for about 2 years. And feel free to follow up with any questions. I'll put my email in the chat as well, and happy to connect after this.
All right, thanks, Max. So I'm gonna hop right into my presentation. And like I said, think of some good questions that you might have for the panel and anything that you might be thinking about throughout my presentation. So I just wanted to kind of start with like a little bit of a disclaimer, just saying that, these are just my pieces of advice. Obviously, you're always going to hear different sorts of advice. I know on social media, I follow tons of budgeting or financial experts that give advice, and it's so hard to know what's right, which one fits for me. So, take this advice as you will, but really think about something that's going to work for you in the long term, and know that you're always going to hear different opinions, but work on what works for you. And like I said, I already sort of introduced myself at the beginning, but if you're just joining, I am Lauren. I'm from the Pitt Career Center, been here for about 2 years now, and I'm the career consultant for engineering and neuroscience students. All right, so just a quick question, just kind of gauge where you guys are at, and you could go ahead and throw this in the chat. So what do you consider absolutes when you're making a budget? So something that you cannot absolutely go without. So I see food, rent, gas, savings, phone bill. Yeah, these are definitely, things that are important and things that you want to make sure that you're working into your budget. Health insurance for sure. And you can keep those coming in just to give, your peers some insight onto what you find important for your budget. But we're definitely going to cover different parts of your budget that, you want to absolutely work in. So one way that I've really seen work for people in budgeting is the 50-20-30 budget. And I know this says it's a minimalist guide, but you certainly don't have to be a minimalist to follow this budget. So quickly, it's broken down by 50% are the absolute necessities that you cannot go without in life. So, your housing, your groceries, how are you going to get around, and your utilities. Those things, most likely need to be paid every single month. So, allotting 50% of your budget to those needs. The next, the 20%, is going to go to your financial obligations. So whatever you find important for yourself to put into a savings account, and I would recommend, whatever you can put into a savings, starting as soon as possible. I know that seems out of reach when you're in college, but once you have a full-time income coming in, it definitely is easier to put some money into savings. Your retirement. So once you get your first full-time job, they're going to offer you some retirement options. And if they do, definitely recommend that again. Paying down your debts, and then an emergency fund. So again, 20% to really those financial obligations. And then 30% going to your voluntary obligations. So, things that you might not need every single month. So if you really enjoy cable TV, even though it's crazy expensive, work that into your budget. If you'd rather go out to eat a lot of the time than creating your own meals and grocery shopping, work that into your budget. And same goes for if you like shopping and traveling, find a way to work that into your budget, but allotting 30% of your budget to those things. So this works for a lot of people. It might not work for you. There's other simpler ways of kind of breaking down budgets, but I think that this is a good way to start. And you'll find tons of information on this, on the internet that you can kind of find worksheets for, videos for. But, if you're just thinking about a budget right now, I think that this is a good introduction into how to start one. All right. And then this is just another sort of even easier way to break down budgeting, sort of like, the absolutes, the not absolutes, is thinking of your fixed and your flex items. So things that you absolutely must have versus the nice to haves. And some advice there is, collecting your bank statements, looking at your banking app from the past 6 to 12 months. Obviously, it's going to look much different. Again, once you get that full-time opportunity, you might have a different income. So you might want to wait till you get that full-time opportunity to start looking at your bank statements. But thinking about what's the fixed things that you absolutely need, and then what are the things you can, go without sometimes, adding up all your fixed expenses. So that rent, those utilities, your groceries, transportation, adding those up, subtracting those from your income each month. And then whatever you have left is your flex, and you can do what you want with that. So if you need a simpler way to break down budgeting, I can't really think of a simpler way than this. So again, there's the 50-20-30 budget, and this is an even easier way to kind of get started. So thinking about some common budget expenses that you guys have already sort of said in the chat. So rent and utilities, and normally you don't want to spend more than 30% of your monthly income on rent. So, you don't want to normally live without your means, not within your means, for paying for your rent. Student loans. So this can also be any sort of other debts like credit card, auto payments, personal loans. Groceries, on average, the most common adult spends $200 to $250 on groceries monthly. So allotting for that in your budget. Phone bill, no matter how fancy the phone is, you want to try not to spend no more than $100 per month on your phone bill if possible. Different sorts of insurance. So, once you're kicked out off of your parents' insurance when you turn 26, you're going to have to start thinking of your own. I just recently had that happen, so it's important. But thinking of, what types of insurance are you going to need as far as health insurance goes. auto insurance, renter's insurance, pet insurance if pets are important to you because they can also get pricey. And then other sorts of insurance that might come up are important to think about. Savings, and again, I talked about this before, just thinking of a goal that you want to work towards and doing that. So even if it's just starting small, like $20 a week you're putting away, that's eventually going to add up. So thinking of some sort of goal that you want to work towards, a goal that works for you, whether it's like a year, 2 years from now, and working towards that. Transportation, entertainment, and then one-time expenses. I think those all kind of speak for themselves, but finding ways to work these into your bills, knowing when your car registration is going to come out each year, knowing when different expenses like gym memberships are going to come out, and allotting those into those monthly budgets. So if you can't really think about what you're paying for now, these are some sort of topics you can think about for the future. And then just some other additional budgeting tips that are important. So monitoring your credit, so making sure that if you have credit cards, which I'll talk about that a little bit later, that you're making sure that your credit score is good. It's going to be important to have a good credit score in the future, and making sure that you're paying off any sort of credit cards, loans that you may have. Growing your savings, I already kind of talked about that. But if it is hard for you to save, a lot of banking apps, I know I personally have PNC, but a lot of them offer a way that they'll just take it right out of your paycheck each month and put it into a savings. So making sure that you're finding ways to save your money. And then again, if you find yourself struggling each month, making sure that you're finding ways to supplement your income. I think that this is something important for a lot of people to realize, is that, if you do want to go traveling, if you do want to do different things that maybe your budget doesn't allow for, finding a way to supplement your income, getting some sort of side hustle, working on the weekends, even if it's you just want to pay down some of your debt and you want to get out of debt faster, there are certainly ways to do that. So thinking about all these things in advance is certainly important. And then we're gonna send out some resources after this presentation. That's why we're collecting all of your emails, but this will be a part of it. Just another great way to get started on, what is going into my budget. So I won't touch on this too much, but this is a great worksheet to get started. All right, so loans, definitely if you aren't lucky enough to walk out of school loan free, you're gonna have some sort of loans to be thinking about over the next few years. So student loans, whatever those may be. So start to get on top of those now, thinking about what loans did you accumulate, talking with your financial aid office, talking with your private banks that maybe you took your loans out with, but making a plan before graduation on what you're going to do. You do have a grace period of 6 months after graduation. Normally, some things might have changed with the pandemic, but you normally have a 6-month grace period until you have to absolutely start paying back your loans. So using that time wisely, making sure that you're going to feel comfortable when that 6-month mark comes to start paying back whatever your monthly payments may be. And there certainly are different repayment options depending on who your servicer is, but looking into those. And I know people have always made financial institutions sound super intimidating, but if you call them, most of the time they can be really helpful. So making sure that you're reaching out and making a plan now that's going to work for you in 6 months, because you do want to start paying off your student loans, I would say as soon as possible, just to make yourself more comfortable in the long run. And then this is just another great resource that all Pitt students have. Is called Grad Ready. So if this is an intimidating topic to you, if you don't know where to get started, certainly logging into Grad Ready is a great resource to start with. All right, so I know I'm moving pretty fast. I just don't want to go over my time. So again, if you're thinking of any good questions during this, certainly our panel will be able to answer those at the end. So savings, like I said earlier, you want to find an attainable goal for yourself. So I know for myself, long-term goals, thinking into the future, like 10 years, that most likely doesn't work for me. So I have to think in small terms, small attainable goals. So what's going to work in a year? So maybe in less than 1 year, you want to be able to go on a vacation. So saving up enough money that you're going to be able to go on a vacation. Maybe in the next 10 years, you want to make a down payment on your first home. So putting money towards a savings for that. And then I think lifetime for all of us is definitely retiring. So finding a savings that works for you in order to retire at the age that you want to retire by. But thinking about what are these goals for you personally and working towards those. And just again, some tips to be, really proactive with this is to track your spending, be aware of what you have, try not to impulse buy. I know that that's easier said than done. I think over the last year, I've impulse bought a ton of things that I probably didn't need. But thinking about those things like, do I absolutely need this, or can I put that towards something that's more important for my goals? And then planning ahead for big purchases. So certainly, maybe you have to buy a new car, maybe you're going to have to move cities, and planning ahead for those so that when those big moments come, you don't feel super overwhelmed. And I know that one of the apps that works for me, again, there's tons of different apps out there, but is the Mint app. And you can see on the right here how it breaks down. It does the work for you. So if you don't even want to do the work, the Mint app does it for you. It breaks it down what you're spending your money on monthly. And if you spend more money in one area monthly than you normally do, it'll give you like a warning email saying, you spent this much money more this month. Is that correct? And you can kind of be like, oh, yes, I did do that. So what's other ways I can, make up for that? But tons of different apps out there. The Mint app is great. It's free. So what more could you want? But find something that works for you. And then I know I talked briefly about emergency funds earlier, and this is just something that I feel like not a lot of students hear about, or maybe even just don't think about, but thinking of an emergency fund. So if an emergency were to happen, you had to live 3 to 9 months without a job, or maybe something medical happened and you couldn't go to work, would you have enough money to live comfortably for those 3 to 9 months? So thinking of, what goes into that emergency fund. And I have right there, earlier I said if you save $20 a week, that adds up to like $1,040 a year. So if that's just a small way to break down your emergency fund, maybe that's not going to pay for 3 to 9 months, but it's certainly going to help in the case of an emergency. So thinking about this in advance, and this is going to be separate from your savings. Saving is going towards your goals, but emergency fund is in case of emergency. All right. And then credit cards. So I feel like we've always all been told, you shouldn't open a credit card. Don't open a credit card until you absolutely need one. But I would say, to get started and get started responsibly, because a credit card is going to be important for you in the long run. So why is that going to be important? You're going to want to probably eventually buy a vehicle or a house, and you're going to need a credit score. Some places require a good credit score to rent. Same with utilities. If you ever want to borrow a large sum of money from a bank, you're going to need a credit score. Some jobs, not too many jobs, but if you're going to work in any sort of like financing jobs, government jobs, you might need a good credit score. And then starting a business, if that's part of your long-term goals, having a good credit score is going to be important. So these are just a few reasons why it's important to have a credit score, but having credit cards is the way to get started. So just some tips is just to remember, only buy what you can afford. Try not to make super big purchase that at the end of the month, you're going to be like, I don't know how I'm going to pay that off. Pay on time and in full every single month. And if you can't pay in full, definitely pay more than the minimum. There's tons of different credit cards out there. I know some of them you don't have any interest for a certain amount of months. Some of them have high interest rates if you're not paying them off monthly. So definitely read the fine print on credit cards. And don't try to use the full portion available to you. So if you're given $5,000 credit each month, try not to use the whole credit each month. And then keep cards open as long as possible. So even if you get a Macy's card and you aren't using that anymore because you don't shop at Macy's anymore, just keep it open. Try not to cut off too many cards too early. And these are just some credit cards that are good for students. I did some research on, again, by no means am I an expert in these areas, but these are certainly good ones to get started for students that I found. And some of them even offer like free FICO credit score checks. different interest rates, and some are even just good for international students who might not have a social security number. So again, by no means am I an expert in this area, but if you're not sure where to start with credit cards, these might be some good options for you. All right, so I know that retirement seems super far away for everyone here, even myself, but it's something that you definitely have to be thinking about and planning for now. So when you get your first full-time job, retirement's going to seem like I'm never going to retire, but you will, and you want to start investing in yourself, investing in your future now. So I won't read through all of this here, but the main thing that I really want people to take away, and maybe isn't something that I really knew going into my first professional job, is that a lot of places do an employee match. So whatever you're putting in is what they're going to match you most of the times, up to a certain percent. So if you're putting like tons of money in there, they might not match it all the time, but like normally like 3 to 8%, they're going to match what you're putting in, and it's pre-taxes. So, starting to put more money in, and if you start with the higher amount, like 8% of your paycheck each month when you go into your first full-time job, you'll never know what a paycheck looks like without that 8% being taken out. So if there's one thing that I would like students, like future professionals, to take away from this, is just to start investing in your future now, thinking about a retirement plan. If your employer doesn't, for some reason, offer a benefits package with a 401k in it, you can normally get some Roth IRAs, which are private plans. So looking into different banking options that do that, but start as soon as possible. Don't wait to start doing it. So just one more poll just to kind of get a glimpse of what you guys are thinking. So let's say you just got your first offer, your first job offer. What is going to be important to you in that first job? So feel free to enter some thoughts in the chat. So pay, certainly, you want to be able to live. Benefits, health insurance, where you're going to be living for sure. Growth opportunities. Yeah, these are all really great answers and things to definitely be thinking about. Is when you accept that first offer, what are you going to be looking for? What questions are you going to be asking? So it's good that you guys are thinking about these. So this is just a good image that I always like to show students, is really what goes into employee benefits, things that you might not have thought about before. So just take a glance at this image. I'm not going to read through every single one, but this will also be in the resource packet. So if you need any sort of like glimpse at this in the future, you'll definitely have it. And then you guys can kind of read through this image yourselves, but this really just stresses the point of negotiating. So employers are expecting you to negotiate that first job offer. Even if you're like, wow, I can't ask for anything else. This is a great first offer. I've got everything I want. I don't need anything else. Just do negotiating. Not only does it show leadership and initiative, but they're expecting it. So definitely find some sort of thing. It doesn't have to be salary. It could be paid time off. It could be, can you guys throw in parking? Just little things like that, but find a way to negotiate. And then you can see that statistic there, I think, is important, that 80% of students and grads who negotiate are at least partially successful. So, there are employers who are working to meet their employees' needs. So certainly find a way to negotiate your offers. And then again, just another sort of image, and this is just really stressing if, Jim doesn't negotiate and Jane does. When they retire, the pay gap will be $43,616. So I know that's a lot to think about over time, but certainly, this again just stresses the importance of negotiating. And if you take anything away from this, definitely this bottom line here. So over the course of Jim's career, he will miss out on $1,037,773 in wages. So wouldn't you rather be Jane, who at least tried to negotiate some part of her offer? All right, and then just a few more things that we're gonna touch on here, because I know we're getting close on time. is just really evaluating your healthcare packages. Again, I know this isn't something that we might be thinking about as a new professional because you're most likely like 23, 24, and you don't have to get your own insurance yet if you're on your parents. But thinking about what is important in health insurance. If you're generally in good health, you certainly most likely won't need the top tier insurances. But thinking about what deductibles are you going to be able to go to any doctor that you want to go to? What if you have people who depend on you, if you have children, all that stuff, thinking about what options are going to be best for you and asking questions. I mean, health insurance was a foreign concept to me when I got my offer, and then I didn't really need it from the bat. But talking with your benefits, coordinator, HR, whoever it may be, and asking them any sort of questions that you may have, because that's what they're there to do, is help you. And like I said, it's reading through the fine print on your healthcare plans. Like I said, are you going to have the right to any doctor? What are going to be the deductibles? Sometimes they're going to be high deductibles if you go to a hospital. If you think you're going to need, a lot of hospital visits, or you don't want to have to pay for a lot when you do have an emergency, taking that into account. And, just different things like, what is the most I'll have to pay out of my own pocket? If there's a dispute about a bill or service, how is this handled? So just really thinking about all these questions, asking them before you accept any sort of offers. And then lastly, just touching on reading really through pay stubs. I think that, when you read through all the stuff that comes out of your paychecks, it can be intimidating. You're like, oh my gosh, where is all of that money going? But reading through each part, obviously you guys can see that that's the general information. Number 5 is really the tax data. So where is your money going? 6, this is always definitely, if you're not salary, a good part to pay attention to on your pay statements. I would say always look at your pay statements depending on how you get paid, but making sure that all of your hours are accounted for. 7, where are your taxes? What are you going to have to start paying attention to when you do your own taxes? Things that were put into your tax deductions pre-tax, so your health insurance, parking, this is where your retirement will be, all that stuff that was pre-tax. And then 9 is your before tax and after tax deductions, like I said. And then your 11 is the totals. And you can kind of read this through yourself, and then paying attention to your vacation, sick time accrual. That's a big part of your first time full job. You're going to definitely feel bad taking sick time or taking vacations, but you work for those. So definitely, make time for yourself in your first career. So paying attention to those leave balances. So if you ever have questions about those, again, always feel free to ask your HR offices, ask whoever's in charge of your benefits at your first full-time job, but don't be afraid to ask. All right, so that's really all for me. I'm going to be wrapping up. Here is the code for OCC credit if you are on the Oakland campus and you are completing the OCC. Definitely feel free to scan that. And then I just wanted to kind of give a disclaimer. So obviously you guys are all here tonight. Tomorrow we're going to be doing social wellness, same time, 7 o'clock. And then Wednesday we're going to be doing, or this is the wrong dates. But then Thursday we're going to be doing the professional wellness. So definitely check out the rest of the events on Handshake. But feel free to join us the next two nights. We definitely encourage it. And then this week is the class of 2021 career week. So we have lots of good stuff going on. So again, check that out at seniors.pitt.edu. See if any other of these events interest you, but we definitely recommend joining as many as possible. And then lastly, and Gabby is going to be putting some of these links in the chat, but definitely feel free, if you already know your post-graduation plans, sharing those with us, and then you'll be entered into a raffle to win a pair of Apple AirPods. So certainly sharing your post-grad plans with us. All right, and that is all from me. There's going to be a few questions here, just that the Career Center kind of wanted to get data on. So if you guys could answer those for us, we would greatly appreciate it. I'll try to exit. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing. All right, so I'm going to try to read through and see if there were any questions, and then if not, Will, you're able to take over. All right, so I see from Johanna, I apologize if I said that wrong, but the question was, do you know if the loan repayment grace period starts over if you go to grad school a couple months after you graduate undergrad? So if you do go to grad school, and there's normally the summer in between your undergrad and your grad school plans, they normally do hold off on your loans. But again, I would check with your loan servicers depending on if it's personal or if it's, through Department of Education, whatever it may be, but making sure that you're checking with them to make sure that is correct. And then would you have separate savings accounts for emergency funds, saving for house, saving for a vacation, or do you keep everything in one account and keep track of how much goes in each category? So I think I kind of covered that, but your emergency fund is definitely separate from your savings goals. At least that's how I think about it, is emergency is in case you have to go without an income for a few months. Are you going to be able to do that? And then your savings is the things you would like to see in your future. So I would say to keep those separate and think of them as separate entities that you're putting money into. And if I skip over any questions, it is because I do not know the answer to them. So I heard you shouldn't go past 30% of your credit limit. I'm not sure of that. And I'm sorry if you guys hear my neighbor's weed whacker. But I'm not sure if I heard you shouldn't go past 30% of your credit limit is true. Again, maybe that could be a question that you ask our panel. Maybe they have some advice on that. How long can you use a student credit card after graduating? I think you can use it for pretty much as long as you want to. The interest rates may change, but that's, again, something that you can look into in that fine print. Someone said, my wife and I have separate savings accounts for emergency funds and savings for things like vacations. Are those accounts surveyed? So I think that was all the questions for me. So Will, you are free to take over.
All right. Thank you very much, Lauren. As Lauren said, my name is Will. I'm from Pitt's Young Alumni Council, and we're joined tonight by Max, Kelly, and Joel. Max and Kelly are also from the Young Alumni Council, and Joel is from Pitt Career Services. And we're just here to help you answer your questions, and we would also love it, since we're Young Alumni and we've been starved for interactions with current students this past 13 months. We would love it for you to turn your cameras on, especially when asking a question, so we can get to know you a little bit. But other than that, I'm going to go ahead through to our panel to let them tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we can jump into your questions. We'll start with Kelly.
Thanks, Will. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Wummer. I'm currently hailing from home here in Pittsburgh, in the Strip District specifically. I graduated in 2013 from the business school. I majored in accounting, and I currently work as an audit manager at Deloitte, which is a Big Four public accounting firm. And looking forward to talking to everyone tonight.
Thanks, Kelly. Joel, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Philliston. I am the director of the Financial Wellness Program here at Pitt, in the Office of Admissions and Financial Aid. Relatively new position. I started in September 2020. So we're still building out the program. Even if you look at the website, a lot of improvements that I want to see, but it's going to get there. Essentially, I am hailing from New Jersey. I recently moved from Texas for this position, and I moved back home with my parents while we're like sheltering in place. So just a little precursor. If you end up moving back home for a little bit after you graduate, it's perfectly okay.
And lastly, Max.
Thanks, Will. Hey, everyone. I'm Max Knice. I'm a 2018 CBA grad. I think I'm the youngest panelist. Just going to put that out there. And similar to, so I grew up outside of Philly. And similar to Joel, I moved home for like 6 months during all of this pandemic craziness. But I'm back in my place down in Atlanta, Georgia now. I work for the Boston Consulting Group down here. Used to travel pretty regularly pre-COVID, but have been on kind of fully remote model for a while. But very much looking forward to getting back to the new normal in the coming months.
All right, thank you guys for your introductions. And at this point, we'd just like to open the floor to any questions you have. Please don't be shy. I'm sure our panelists will give you very honest and useful answers.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. This can be for anyone. And my question is like kind of silly because I don't know how to word it correctly, but I don't like doing my taxes. And I know when you were mentioning like about your taxes and how to do certain things. So as a teacher, we get a certain write-off. And I'm like, let me get ahead of the game and start filling out some of my, organizing my receipts for my purchases. And at the Dollar Tree, because again, I'm a teacher, so we got to be frugal. They had this little card that said tax exempt and it said fill out your form. Man, I opened up that PDF. I said, this is intimidating. This is a lot of information. So like, what do you recommend I do? Because I was thinking if I do the tax exempt form, is that the same thing I would use when I file my taxes later in the year when I complete out that portion? Or should I just, so basically my question I guess I'm asking is, should I use my receipts now and fill out those tax exemption forms as I make my purchases? Or should I wait until, I guess, next year when I file for my tax and just use my receipts as I normally do or as I have been doing? Alicia, why are you laughing at me?
I'm gonna answer a broader question that Shannon kind of alluded to, and it's just how should you do your taxes? Maybe we'll start there. I did my taxes last weekend. I used the free version of H&R Block once again, and I was done in just about an hour. And I know the form that Lauren showed earlier is somewhat intimidating. It's got lots of boxes and lots of fields. And if you try to fill out the hard copy, right, like tax return form, you have to do a lot of matching up. But H&R Block and TurboTax and all those systems have gotten so good, you can either like import your kind of pay statement from your employer, or you can upload kind of a PDF version of it, and it fills in, I think mine filled at 98, if not everything correctly. And then really you just have to do a quick review and say, hey, is the thing on the paper that says box 1D, is that the right number? But a lot of the work, if you use one of those even free online tools, is done for you these days.
Yeah, that's what I did this past year and the last couple years, but I figured let me try something different. And I said, I don't want to try this different, but I wasn't sure if that form is better or worse. But yeah, that's what I normally do, Max. Thank you.
I could grab a question that was in the chat earlier about the credit utilization question that was asked, like how much of your credit limit should you use? So essentially, when you're thinking about that, it's really looking at your credit score. So that suggestion of using under 30% of your credit limit, that just maximizes what your credit score is. And the reason why that's important is when you apply for a loan, the higher your credit score, the lower the interest rate that you will receive in interest as far as what they charge on the APR. But it also just shows that you're a responsible borrower, because if you're using way too much of that credit limit, then you're almost a risk, because you're borrowing that money. That money isn't necessarily income. So that's why they say you want to keep it below 30%. It shows that you're more responsible. It almost guarantees that when you do apply for a loan, you will get the best interest rates or APRs when you apply for a home loan, a car loan in the long term. And at the end of the day, it's just a safety measure for you. That way you're not over borrowing. And if something should happen, then you won't essentially hurt your credit score over time.
I have a question. I don't know if many people can relate to this, but I'm from Massachusetts, and the cost of living up there is a lot higher than here. Like you can't even get like a 1 bedroom for under like $1,700 a month. So it's just really ridiculous. So like I know a conversation, at least amongst my friends from home, is when is the appropriate time to like invest in a property? Like if you're going to be paying that much, you might as well have a house. So it's like, what are the steps for even thinking about that? I know like down here, it's like a lot cheaper. So like paying rent might not be, like it's not uncomfortable enough to even want to consider that maybe. But I was wondering people's thoughts on that.
I can speak to that a little bit just from my own experience. So I do live in Pittsburgh and do benefit from the low cost of living, and do still rent, but I definitely have been thinking about buying a house. But I think that when you are thinking about buying a house, it's, I'm scrolling through like Zillow every day and looking at what's out there, and you just see like, it gives you like a, calculated, this is an expected mortgage payment on this house. But I think you have to think about everything else that goes into it too, and all the costs that you're not seeing in that estimate, or all the costs that are going to go into being a homeowner. So I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong answer, but I think it's making sure that you're thinking about the full picture and everything that's going to come with home ownership, and whether you're ready financially and otherwise to take that on. If you feel like you want to get a lay of the land, for where you're going to be living first, and maybe don't want to dive right into a permanent property, I think thinking about, can you live with roommates, or can you live a little bit further outside of like a downtown or a business district where maybe the rent's a little bit cheaper. But I think it's just making sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So comparing your rent to all the costs that will come with home ownership. I think like taxes is a huge thing that gets people, and you don't think about it until you're like, wow, I have to pay, all these taxes that come with home ownership. So I think just making sure that you're thinking about the full picture of it and comparing the two, and then figuring out, what you're ready to enter into.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I agree with everything Kelly said. I've also gotten to the point where I'm paying a lot of rent every month, and it kind of feels like, I'm never going to get that money back. Versus once you do purchase a home, like while you have a big mortgage, and that can seem scary, like you also have an asset that belongs to you. You can sell that. Hopefully it also goes up in value. And every month you're putting money in that, some of that is going towards the value of the home. I do think like the trade-off is like I think what Kelly alluded to is you're paying for convenience with rent. And so like you're much more flexible. You don't have to worry. You're not responsible. And so especially if you're not sure, where you want to live longer term, more than 2 to 3 years down the line, like I've thought about like when my lease is up here in July, do I look to buy in Atlanta? But then I'm also like, I'm still not sure I'll be in Atlanta 3 years from now. And then do I want to sell so quickly or deal with finding someone to rent to? And so that's kind of the trade-off I think everyone just kind of has to make for the situation they're in.
I'll jump in just because I've actually purchased 2 houses, so I'll just briefly comment on expand on what Kelly and Max did. I think they hit all the main points. But for example, when I purchased my house in Houston, I live in Pittsburgh now. I purchased it under the assumption that I would move with the company that I work for under the relocation program, which basically covers all your losses in the event that you move. And then things changed in my life. I still work for the same company, but I moved to Pittsburgh on my own. And all of the money I got back in equity when I sold my house after I paid the real estate agents their commission, taxes on there's closing costs that goes to the government whenever a property changes assets stuff. That basically only covered the cost of me moving back to Pittsburgh. So when I moved back to Pittsburgh, it was basically like I had rented all that money, and which probably would have ended up being less money out of my pocket in the base case, because of the cost of upkeep and maintenance of your house, right? And I also wouldn't have had to deal with fixing fences to meet HOA standards and things. On the flip side of that, you get a lot more like agency when you own your house. So like I have 3 pets. When I first moved out to Pittsburgh, before we bought our house up here, it took me forever to I basically took the apartment that was going to let me have 3 pets, because there just, so, there's some, I think, quality of life differences that you need to account for, and not just the financial ones. But certainly, if you don't think you're going to be in an area for a long time, like at least 5 years, purchasing a house, unless you're going to have some like corporate relocation package if you move, is probably going to be financially like break even or worse.
This is kind of a similar question about like renting versus buying, but in terms of cars. So like, I'm wondering if you guys have any tips on like if it's worth it to buy a car versus lease a car, or even have a car at all if you like live in an urban area.
I think I can jump in. I think for me, and I've actually never looked into leasing. I've always owned my cars, but I think for me, and others can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's if you're going to be putting a lot of mileage on your car every year, it doesn't make sense to lease. My job, I travel for, pre-COVID, I traveled for, but when I say travel, I mean I drove to north central Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Ohio. So it was kind of, not far enough away to fly. So I knew I would be putting a ton of miles on a car. So that for me just made sense to buy. I think that if you aren't going to be using it a lot, or you aren't going to be putting as many miles a year on it, then leasing could be a better option for you. But that's kind of at least my experience for why I chose to buy.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I actually just bought a car for the first time back in December. And also think you can also think about kind of car in almost 3 ways, right? You could lease, you could finance, which is kind of similar to buying a house on a mortgage, or you could buy outright. I think this is a topic where there's less right answers and people seem to have strong opinions. I'm in Kelly's camp, where and probably the way I was raised, like not really to lease, but right, do as I say, not as I do. My dad started leasing a couple of years ago. And I think partially like similar to renting, like when you lease a car, there's a bit of a convenience factor. And like if you know you're not going to own the car very long, like it might be attractive to lease, especially if it's a newer car or a nicer car, and you almost want to treat yourself a little bit. I think typically people that lease plan to kind of turn the car in and start a new lease for a different car every couple years. It is definitely, I think, if you do the math, the most expensive option. But again, it's the most convenient and maybe the most fun. But I would like recommend for financial wellness purposes, like buying makes more sense. And then depending, right, you could buy used if it's something you can afford to buy outright, or if you can finance it. And typically you can get a car loan right now with pretty low interest rates, probably around 3 to 5%, depending on your credit score. And Joel will correct me if I misspoke there. But that's pretty manageable in terms of interest. And also, car loans typically will run 3 or 5 years, and it's a good idea to not take them be super long, so you can have the car paid off before you look to sell it or trade it in. Yeah.
I agree with everything, and it's also a portion of, do you really need that vehicle? Depending on where you'll actually, land as far as your next location. If you're going to be in New York, for example, if you're going to be in Pittsburgh and get relatively close to downtown, you may still be able to take advantage of public transportation and still be saving on the cost factor. California, different urban areas where you may not need a vehicle as much. I also would say just being careful with buying a vehicle outright. I've seen and I've experienced it myself, where I purchased a vehicle and I was like, that is the best vehicle. It has about 150,000 miles, but it's a Maxima. It'll work. Right after college. And within a year, it was kaput, and essentially ended up financing. So I would definitely say it's going to be those factors that we discuss, as far as, are you going to be relatively close to work? Are you going to be doing high mileage? And then from there, if you really don't need a vehicle yet, that might be a good place where you could save some extra money. And some of that extra money that you save could go towards you purchasing a vehicle outright, a newer car outright. I was reading an article about that where Dave Ramsey encouraged somebody to save up towards their next vehicle rather than financing. So that person bought it as cash. So definitely get your budgeting and your saving aspects together first, and then start to think about, all right, well, what is it that I would need out of this vehicle? And if I don't really need a vehicle right now, maybe I could push it down the road and kind of save some more.
Okay, we have a question from the chat. It is, how do you prioritize all the pieces of your finances and decide where to put extra money first? For example, loans, retirement, travel/slush, emergency fund, saving for house, car, etc.
I think for me, I think this is like a super personal question, first of all. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But I think for me, it's just about like what's the most important to me. I think you almost have to put them in a ranking of like what's the most important, what's the next important, what's the next important. And then I kind of dedicate money to those things accordingly. I think some of the things you have to make sure you're thinking about the practicability of them. So obviously retirement is hugely important. And while the, vacation to Hawaii next year sounds awesome, your retirement in X number of years is going to be hugely important as well. So I think it's taking that into account, but I think it's what's important to you. If you really want to take that trip to wherever, do an African safari or do like, your dream vacation, then, and that's really important to you, then that would be up higher on your list and prioritizing more money toward that. So I think it's just thinking about your future goals and how you would rank those in importance, and also, practicability for your life and what you can afford. I do in Lauren's presentation, I do the 50-20-30. That works for me really well. And then I kind of look at, okay, what in that 30 bucket, what's important to me there? Where do I want to put those funds? So that's kind of at least how I approach it.
I agree too. It's really just taking that time to set up your goals. One thing I would just say for you to be careful with is not building too much debt for yourself. With student loans, it's understandable. Sometimes we want to pay that off over time, especially depending on how much you borrow. But when we're talking more so personal debt, always think of it like this. The personal debt that you have is money that could belong to you that you're paying to someone else. Essentially, it's great if you have experiences. So if it's an experience like a vacation or you're going on that safari trip, if you saved up for it and you used your credit card and you could pay it, you have a plan, I could pay it off in about 4 or 5 months, then by all means, live it up. But at the same time, you don't want to put yourself in a position where 4 or 5 years down the road, you'll still be paying on debt that you used 5 years ago. So you just want to be careful with that. But otherwise than that, as long as you have set up your budget, you're thinking about emergency savings, and you have your other goals in place, it really comes down to you at that point. But you just want to be careful with the debt portion of it.
All right. This might be our last question coming out of the chat here. It is, if the job you have between undergraduate and graduate school has an hourly salary, how do you decide whether or not to move somewhere with a higher minimum wage versus staying where the cost of living is low? And I'll jump that one to Max first, since he didn't answer. Get to add on to the last question.
I'll keep this one short. I don't have a simple answer. I think the best thing to do for something like this is to kind of use some sort of budgeting tool, either your own spreadsheet or the tool that Lauren's going to run out, and just kind of run the numbers, right? If you know if a higher cost of living, a higher minimum wage state, right, has a higher hourly rate, just calculate what you think, right, how many hours a year you'd work, and kind of look what your income might be, and then run down that kind of like the expenses you think you'd need. I think there's some good tools out there you can Google, like average cost of living index, that typically gives you like a multiplier. And so if you've done your budget for, let's say, what's worked in Pittsburgh, you can find online like how much more or less expensive is another area compared to Pittsburgh on average. And that might even be enough, right? Like take a look at that multiple versus what the minimum wage difference is. And that might be at least like a top down, high level way to judge that. I see Joel nodding, so I guess what I said isn't totally wrong.
No, it was perfect.
It sounded good.
It looked like someone came off mute for a second with another question.
I do have one question here. How do you go about start investing, like after graduation?
So I prepared for this.
You want to take this one?
I prepared for this question.
You looked ready, so.
I did. Someone said this to me once in a finance class, and they were right. If you think you're smarter than the market, you're not. Because anything you read, someone else already read before you, and it's already priced in. So I think honestly that the best thing to do and the best way, like long term, if you're gonna invest is first, I would say like max out if you have extra money, right? Make sure you're paying off your debt and make sure you're kind of maxing out what you can put towards a 401k or any sort of retirement vehicle. If you're in a situation where then you have some extra money you want to invest, I think looking at some sort of managed or index fund is the best way to do it. And so I have some money with Ally Bank in kind of a managed investment fund. And so I just put money into it. It rebalances itself. It's had a very good return through all the volatility. And it doesn't require me to do much. I really don't have to think about it. I can just, when I have extra money, put it in there. And you can kind of set your goals, how much risk you're willing to take and how long when you want to use this money, right? Is this for the next 3 years or do you want it 10 years plus down the line? And it will invest it into kind of the best things. I mean, if you want to have a little bit of fun, right, and kind of pick some of your own stocks, like I would treat that more like almost gambling, like put in there what you're okay to lose. And if you win something, that's great, but you're probably also going to lose. And there's been plenty of apps out there now that let you do that pretty easily. I have a little bit in a Robinhood account too, just because it's fun. But again, I know that anything I read that's like a stock tip, like you should buy this. Like there are people at big banks that do trading of, with millions of dollars every day that have read those reports too. They maybe actually wrote them. And so like if there was like what they call arbitrage in finance, like the price is too low or too high based on what the value of the company is, somebody else would have already taken advantage of that. Now that doesn't mean you can't still grow your money with investing. That's a great thing to do. But I would suggest you put it in a Vanguard or some sort of managed fund with a bank that has low fees, and just kind of let it run. And the biggest thing is don't pull your money out if there's some sort of drop in the economy, right? Like about a year ago, the market was really low, and then it came back. And like the same thing happened in 2008. Like the worst thing you can do is see your money lose value and pull it out after it's lost stuff, because that's taking a definite loss. If you leave it in, you give it the opportunity to come back, and the market will always come back. It just depends on how long.
Okay, I think that is all the time we have for this session, but there will be 2 more sessions to ask questions on admittedly different topics, but certainly encourage you to come to those as well over the next 2 evenings. Thank you, Joel, Max, and Kelly for providing us with your wisdom. And obviously, thank you to all of our students for coming and listening. We really appreciate it. Just a reminder that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Is the social Adulting 101, and then on April 15th, there's the professional Adulting 101. I think there was some unanswered questions about salary negotiating in the chat that we didn't get to. I think that Thursday night session would be a great time to ask those questions. And reminder to check out that link that Max provided if you're interested in joining the Young Alumni Council. We certainly need young Panthers to come and carry the torch forward. It's actually Max, Kelly, and I are all terming off this year, sadly. So we'll be needing new faces to carry on our legacy. Otherwise, Lauren, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add at the end, but we're certainly all wrapped up here.
Nope, that's everything for me. Gabby put some links in the chat. There is a salary negotiation workshop coming up this week as part of the class of 2021 career week. So definitely check that out if you do have some more salary negotiation questions, but also attend the next few nights. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.